It was late on a Monday afternoon as I sat on the toilet with my pants down around my ankles and listened as they laughed at me. They thought the whole thing was funny, especially the part about my not having a clue. How could a guy not know his wife was being unfaithful to him and doing it right under his nose? Colin Wilson, the one that said he was fooling around with my wife, was telling Ben Kramer, his friend, how he had won her over at the party last week. That was the party where I was called away during the festivities to investigate a scene of a break-in at a local art gallery. I was only gone for about 2 hours, but I did return before the evening was over. I found my wife at a table with 3 other people, one of them Colin Wilson. The other couple sitting there was his boss and his wife. My name is Brian Sexton, and I am an insurance investigator for a worldwide insurance company that deals exclusively with high-end clients. You probably wouldn't recognize the name since we catered to a very exclusive clientele. I joined them right out of college, and I've been with them now for just over 15 years. I'm 37 and in my prime. My job is to investigate the conditions around accidents where a large claim might be made. Most of it's routine, but sometimes it gets quite exciting. I investigate thefts and robberies mostly, but sometimes auto accidents if more than 1 or 2 of our cars are involved. I am very good at it, and I have a reputation in my industry. I was often loaned out to other companies, but at a steep price. I traveled often, but never for long periods, and if a lengthy investigation was required, I had people to stay at the site and do the legwork. I've been married to Allison for 14 years, and we have 2 wonderful kids, Regina 10 and Christine 8. Allison is a year older than me and works for the same company as a receptionist for Bill Quinn, the president of the company. She and I met and married before she joined the company, but when she lost her job, I wanted her to try to work for my company. We had to get permission from HR since it was against company policy for employees to fraternize, but since I was a valuable employee, they agreed to hire her. Fortunately, Bill Quinn was looking for a new secretary, and Allison had over 5 years as a personal assistant to a corporate executive. He interviewed her and liked her immediately. She was hired as his personal secretary. The 2 men that I mentioned earlier, Colin Wilson and Ben Kramer, were specialist underwriters who wrote policies for large companies or individuals with very expensive holdings. They were acquaintances only, not friends of mine. Both worked for Jerry Scogins, a nice guy who was a good friend. I reported directly to Bill Quinn and worked independently most times, but I sometimes took interesting assignments from Jerry. The conversation that I overheard was just a week after the party. I had come to the restroom to relieve myself, and I had been sitting there for some time with cramps and sweats. I had eaten some scallops for lunch a day ago, and I think they might have been just a little off. While I was cursing my luck, Colin and Ben came in. They seemed oblivious to the closed door of the stall and began to talk about the party. That's when Colin started to boast about his latest conquest to Ben. I listened to the story with a growing uneasiness in my gut that had nothing to do with the cramps and sweats from bad fish. How'd you get close to her? I didn't think she would do something like that. Come on, tell me since I wasn't there myself. We danced a couple of dances, and she was pretty friendly, but Brian was there, and she just smiled when I suggested we go off to my office. She said that Brian wouldn't be too thrilled if she were to do that, so then what? What did you do? Well, I talked her into a drink at the bar with me while Brian was dancing with Judy, his secretary. I had the bartender give me a double shot, and I swapped mine with hers while she was talking with someone else. That was the easy part. I just wanted to get her a little tipsy so I could hold her hand on the dance floor. You know, take what I could get. Yeah, but Brian was still there, so what could you really do? Hey, wait a minute. You didn't plan for his departure, did you? No way. That was just luck. We were dancing a fast dance when he came over to tell her he had to leave for a while. She wanted him to take her home first, but he told her to stay and have fun since he was sure he could get back before too long. She wasn't too keen on the idea, but she stayed. She sat with me and Jerry and his wife. What happened next? Get to the good part. Well, Brian left and I got her another drink. I had Joe make it a double again, and she never noticed the difference. We danced a couple of slow dances, and by then she was almost gone. She was hanging on me while I grabbed her behind, and a couple of times she pressed against me and sort of giggled. I knew that 1 or 2 more drinks were all it would take. I got her another one and she drank it down like a pro. I can see it coming. You got it. One more double and she was feeling dizzy. I suggested we go outside for some fresh air and she agreed. I took her out to my car and we sat in the back. She was almost out of it, so I held her hand and she seemed to enjoy it. She blushed but didn't stop me. I couldn't hold back anymore. So I got closer to her. She watched me, waiting, when she saw me, she hugged me. She gave me a quick favor, but that's not what I was there for. I pushed her back. I made love to her like there's no tomorrow. I can't believe that Allison would do that. She never seemed like the type to cheat on her husband or to give in to the likes of you. Are you sure this actually happened? I swear it's true. I have a date with her next Saturday when she usually goes to get her hair done. She said she'd meet me and for me to get a motel room. I'm going to spend the afternoon with her. You'll see. Well, I envy you, man. Allison is one attractive woman. I always wondered what Brian did to deserve her. Maybe you can set me up when you get tired of her. Maybe, we'll see. In the meantime, don't even think about this conversation. I don't want anything to ruin this. Okay, no problem. They both walked out of the restroom while I sat there trying to keep my stomach from coming up. I couldn't believe what I just heard. Could this actually be true? I began to think back to that night. It was almost 11 when I returned to the party and Allison was sitting with Colin and Julie and Jerry Scogins. Allison didn't seem drunk when I sat down and she had been talking with Julie about the kids. Colin spoke to me but didn't stay long before he left. I did notice Allison say anything to him, but I thought nothing of it. The only thing that was strange about that night was that Allison wanted to have intimate relations when we got home. That was not all that unusual, but she normally didn't want to do it that late. That night, she was particularly passionate. Guilt? Remorse? Maybe. It had been a week since the party, and I hadn't seen any difference in Allison or her behavior. She never mentioned anything about me being gone during the party or anything about what she did when I was gone. I did ask her, and she said she danced some with Colin and Jerry, but mostly just watched. She and Julie were talking about school and the play the kids were in, but she said that was about all. She would rather have come home when I left, she said. I let it go and decided to watch her more carefully. Hey babe, do you have plans for this Saturday? I was going to go golfing if it's okay with you. I watched her face for her reaction. I have an appointment to get my hair done this Saturday just after lunch. It should take me at least an hour or an hour and a half. Where are you going to play golf? So she was going to get her hair done. How would Colin know that unless she told him? I hadn't even known that. It seemed that this thing was all too real. I guess the country club. I might see if Ben Kramer can join me. I think he and Jerry are members there, right? I have no idea. I know Jerry is, but I don't know Ben or his wife very well, so I'm not sure. Me either. Hey, what about Colin Wilson? You were talking to him at the party, right? He might be able to come along. Allison gave me a strange look. She paused before she answered. Why would you want to go with him? He is, pardon the expression, not a nice guy. I had to dance with him a couple of times at the party, but I was really turned off by him. He's not a good person now. That was interesting. Was she trying to talk me out of asking him so they could have their rendezvous, or was she trying to convince me that she doesn't like him? Either way, it seemed very unusual for her to speak about someone else that way. Oh, I don't know much about him, but he's a friend of Ben's, and they seem to be close. Maybe it's a bad idea. I'll just call Phil and Charlie. They always want me to join them. That sounds like a better plan. Stay away from Colin. He's not trustworthy. Okay, he's off my list. So you're okay with golf? It's fine with me since I'll be out anyway. Why don't we plan for dinner later at the Cypress Inn? My hair will look beautiful, and you'll be relaxed from golf. You can take me out and show me off. I can drop Chrissy and Gina off at my parents'. I agreed, and we made plans to meet Saturday afternoon at home by 5:30 to get ready. If I was careful, I could get all the information I needed to separate from her that afternoon. It would be really cool to confront her at dinner at one of the nicest places in town. At work the next day, I went down to the equipment room to get some of the things I needed to do my investigation of my wife and her friend. I decided to take one of the company vans with the surveillance gear. I would leave it at the company lot until Saturday morning when I left for golf. I got 2 of the small transmitters to put into her purse and car, and 1 of the small GPS units that I could install in her car. That would tell me exactly where she was at any time. The van was also video capable, but I couldn't decide what to do with it. Since Colin said they were going to a motel, I couldn't see any way to take pictures. Maybe I could put a camera unit in her jacket, but only if I knew what she was going to wear. I would try, but couldn't be sure. If she went anywhere, I could follow her by the GPS unit. The surveillance van could tap into its signal so that I could watch her location on a grid in the van. It was programmed with the local street map so I could tell the actual address within 100 feet. The sound transmitters would pick up any voices and I could record them in the van. All of this could be done automatically, so I didn't even have to be in the van. All I had to do was park it within a mile of where she was. Neat. I planned to spend the rest of the week just observing. I was very good at it since that was what I did for a living. I watched Ben and Colin but saw nothing out of the ordinary. I normally stopped in to see my loving wife at least once a day, but now I stopped a little more often. I still saw nothing to make me suspicious, but decided to try to see what I could get out of Ben. He was working on a policy for a large factory complex, and I normally spent some time just looking over the site and making contingency plans for a possible disaster. It was called risk analysis and was part of every underwriting process. I stopped by his desk, just across from Colin's, that Tuesday. He was there working on his draft. "Hey Ben, I'd like to take a look at Baxter's plant layout today. Got some time to take me around?" He looked up with a distracted look on his face until he registered what I was talking about and then just shrugged. "Sure, I can go anytime. I need to get back there anyway to take some pictures. When do you want to go? How about an hour or so? Great. I'll stop and pick you up at your desk on the way." I left after a few more words and looked back just as I was moving around the corner in time to see a smirk between Ben and Colin. They looked at me just as I walked out of sight. Interesting, jerks. I decided I was going to make Ben pay. He was not guilty of anything except working with Colin and making crude remarks about my wife, but he was in on the plan and decided to watch me get betrayed by Colin, so he was just as guilty in my book. Ben stopped by about an hour later as planned, and we left in my truck. I put one of the little transmitters in my truck console. It could receive any conversation in or around the truck. I wanted some of what I was going to say to Ben on tape. Some would be just between him and me. As we pulled out of the lot and started the 25 minutes trip to Baxter's, I began to talk. "So tell me, Ben, did you enjoy the party last week? I wasn't able to make it, Brian. I was traveling, so I missed all the fun. What fun was that, Ben? Was that Colin spending time with my wife? Is that the fun you missed?" Ben was stunned and didn't know what to say. He stuttered and twisted in his seat and actually reached for the door handle until he realized where he was. He finally slumped down and looked over at me. "How did you know?" "All I know is what Colin told me." "I don't even know if it's true. Do you think he would lie about something like that? Do you think he would make that up?" "I don't think so, no. But how did you know? You weren't even there from what I heard. Weren't you called away for a couple of hours?" "That's when it happened. Colin told me he got her drunk and then took her out to his car. How I know is not your concern. I just want to know what else Colin told you. Does he have any plans for another get-together?" This was to see if I could trust anything this guy told me. He said they were going to meet up this Saturday when she was supposed to get her hair done. He was going to get a room this time. That's all I know, honest Brian. "Well, I want to thank you for being a good friend and for telling me this," I said sarcastically. "I know you wouldn't want to be involved in something like this. You were going to tell me anyway, weren't you?" "Yes, of course. I like you and Allison. I wouldn't want anything like this to happen to you. Colin is a real jerk. I'm sorry you had to force me to come clean. I feel like a real jerk, the hypocritical person." "What was it he said?" "Oh yeah, maybe he could have her when Colin was finished with her." With that, I reached into the console and turned off the recorder. It had what I wanted for later. What I wanted to say now was off the record. "It's no problem, Ben. As long as you do as I tell you to, you'll be okay. Mess with me, and you're going to be in a world of trouble. Clear?" Ben just shook his head affirmatively. He had gotten the point. "Just one more thing, Ben. None of our conversation gets back to Colin. He's not to know what I know, and you're not going to tell him. If I find out that you've said anything to him, I'll punish you first, and then I'll make sure you're fired, and that word gets out that you can't be trusted. Do you understand me? You know I have ways to listen to you and Colin, so I'll know if you mess up. I won't say anything to Colin. I won't even talk to him if you want. No. Do as you always do and let him talk. That's all you have to do. No problem if you seem to go along with him. I know the truth now. Just remember what I said and you'll be okay. We said very little after that and spent the next 2 hours at the site without speaking. He did his thing and I did mine. I had what I needed and Ben was in trouble as well. He just didn't need to know it right now. That week was one of the longest weeks of my life. I watched my wife relentlessly, but she did nothing out of the ordinary. It was Wednesday night and the kids were attending a school dance for the young ones, and it was supposed to end at about 9:30. I was sitting in the family room just staring at the TV when Allison came in and sat down on my lap. She put her arms around my neck and started to nuzzle my ear. We have about 2 hours before I have to go pick up the kids. Want to cuddle? While I was a little confused and angry with what was going on, I was also human and a man. I reached around her back and pulled her tightly against me. We hugged each other and got close. Take me upstairs to your bed right now. I want to make love with you. I needed no urging and followed her up the stairs and into our bedroom, watching her sweet backside all the way. She had begun to undress herself as we went, tossing the clothes into a corner as we entered the room. I was not far behind with my shirt and kicking my shoes off at the same time. We tumbled onto the bed and got close to each other. Come here, big boy. I want to see you up close and personal. I love this woman so much. I forgot all the doubt and hurt and everything else as I watched her. We made love to each other passionately and we really had a good time together. We lay there in each other's embrace for some time, not needing to speak or disrupt the mood with action. It was love at its most intense. I had momentarily forgotten the doubts and fears that this could be the end for us. I wanted to forget and believe that it was all a lie. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. That was really amazing, husband. I think we should do this more often, don't you? We seem to have been out of sync for a while. Let's not let that happen again. Okay. I'll definitely make an effort. What time is it? Do we have time for a quick shower? It's after 9 and I have to pick up the kids. We can continue later if you want or wait until our date on Saturday night. I can have the kids stay at mom's for the night. How about that it's a date? Is there anything else on Saturday that might interfere? Like what? You have golf and I have a hair appointment. Then, my love, we have a date for dinner and after that, I'm all yours to do whatever you want with me. And you better want to do many, many things to me. Have you had a better offer recently? Never. Okay, it's a deal. Allison quickly got dressed and left to get the kids. I laid there for a while, reflecting on what had just happened. She had done what she usually did and she hardly ever gave me a massage. What she did tonight was usually all she would do. How could she give Colin a massage after making love to him if she wouldn't even give me a massage? How could this woman make love to me like this if she was involved with someone like Colin Wilson? I knew she was intelligent, but was she also that good of an actress? Something was definitely not right, and I was determined to find out on Saturday. While she was gone, I checked the transmitters and confirmed that they were working perfectly. I planned to install them in her car and purse on Friday night. I was all prepared, except for one more meeting with Ben Kramer. I needed to find out which hotel Colin had made a reservation at. Ben would find out for me, or else he would face the consequences of not complying. The next morning, I called Ben and asked him to meet me in the cafeteria on the 3rd floor. He agreed without questioning, and I was waiting at one of the tables when he arrived. He joined me in silence, wondering how he would fulfill my request. He was afraid of what I might do if he failed. Eventually, he consented, but asked me how I would know if I didn't disclose the meeting location to him. I assured him that he needn't worry about that. I had my ways. With that, he left. Before he exited, I discreetly placed one of the transmitters under his jacket collar, reminding him of our agreement. He was so apprehensive that he didn't notice a thing. The transmitter was nearly invisible, held in place by adhesive, and he wouldn't realize it was there. I returned to my office and switched on the receiver. It hummed, indicating that Ben was back at his desk and speaking with Colin. I heard him ask Colin to meet him in the copier room in 10 minutes. Colin agreed, and then there was nothing until Ben stood up to meet Colin. I settled back, ready to listen. What's going on, buddy? Any issues with the policy? You know I'm the best. You're full of it, Colin. I was with Brian yesterday at the site, and he doesn't seem to be having any problems at home. I asked him if everything was okay, and he said it couldn't be better. I think you've been lying to me about his wife. Come on, man. I'm telling you the truth. Why don't you believe me? Where are you taking her on Saturday? You mentioned a hotel. Which hotel? Maybe if you show me a receipt for a room or something, I'll believe you. Otherwise, I think you're lying to me. Oh, really? I already have a reservation at the Skyview Motel on Statler Street for Saturday night. I can check in at 2 p.m., and she'll be there by 2:15 p.m. Is that enough proof for you? You can call the Skyview and verify my name for the reservation. Is that good enough? Do you want to use my cell phone all right? I guess that will do. Colin, I really envy you. Allison is truly amazing. I hope you realize that she has a good marriage with Brian, and you're jeopardizing that. You should be careful and think this through. That's not my problem. If she's willing, so am I. Plus, if her marriage was so great, why would she want to be intimate with me? That was all I needed to hear. So I turned off the receiver and let it continue recording. I was beginning to believe everything that was happening now. I had hoped that Colin would back down and admit that he was fabricating this, but now he had confirmed the hotel and was simply waiting. At the very least, I had the address, so I could input it into the equipment in the van. Everything would automatically record on Saturday, and I wouldn't have to be near them. I didn't want to witness or hear my wife as she shattered my heart into pieces. I felt lost, but I had to carry out my plan and gather enough evidence against her, Colin, and Ben. The first thing I did was call the motel to confirm Colin's reservation. It was indeed true. Now, I just had to wait until Friday night. But then I had an idea. What if I could capture some photos of them entering the motel room? I decided to visit the motel that afternoon to see what I could do. I walked into the office of the Skyview Motel and waited for the clerk. He had a shady demeanor, but that was fine with me. Honesty wasn't my priority at that moment. Hello there, I'm an investigator for an insurance company, and I need some information. I have identification and a warrant for you. I quickly displayed my badge and handed him a document that resembled a search warrant, fooling most people. The $100 bill I slipped to him certainly didn't hurt either. Yeah, sure, man. What do you need to know? I asked him to confirm Colin Wilson's reservation and inquired if a room number had been assigned yet. He replied no, and I asked him if he could assign Colin a room on the first floor facing Statler Street. He hesitated, but when I slipped another $50 his way, he finally provided me with a room number that would allow me to capture the events on video. I informed him about the van that would be parked in the motel's lot, and he nonchalantly shrugged, claiming it was not a problem. I thanked him once again for his assistance and slipped another $50, ensuring his silence. He gave me a devious grin and tucked the bills into his pocket. After my departure, I realized that I could capture the video I desired by positioning the camera through the front window of the van, which would be facing their room. I was now fully prepared. Friday at work was challenging for me. I didn't know what to do with myself, so I walked up to Bill Quinn's office, using the excuse of discussing my visit to the art gallery that had been robbed. He didn't really need to know, but I wanted to see my wife. As I approached, her face brightened upon seeing me. She gestured for me to come to her desk, and I obliged. I've noticed that you've been coming to see me more than usual. I'm not complaining, but is there something going on that I should know about? There's nothing I'm aware of. I just enjoy seeing you, that's all. Is Bill in? I appreciate it. And yes, he's in. Should I buzz him for you? Yes, please. I need to speak with him about the art gallery job. I entered Bill's office and conversed with him for some time. Bill was relatively young to be a president, but I understood that he had established quite a reputation for himself. He had initiated this site and several others, and held a significant stake in the company. He had a beautiful wife named Naomi, whom I had met on multiple occasions. She embodied the quintessential trophy wife: blonde, attractive, incredibly pretty, and stunning. She and Allison were around the same age and spoke frequently, and Bill and I were fairly close. During our conversation, I decided to ask him what his impression of Colin Wilson was. He often inquired about the job performance of other employees, as he had been urging me to take on more management responsibilities. However, this particular question was personal. Why do you want to know about Colin? Is there something going on that I should be aware of? I need you to inform me if one of my employees is causing trouble. Is that what this is about? Well, I may have a significant problem with Colin. I don't particularly like him or Ben. I might have some additional information for you this weekend. If things go as planned, I'd like to call you at home on Sunday, if that's all right. Otherwise, I'll wait until Monday. We'll see. Until then, I'd prefer if you didn't mention it to anyone. Okay. No problem. I'll be waiting to hear from you. You know I trust your judgment in situations like this. You've always been fair with your evaluations, and I respect that. I just wish you would consider accepting the VP position I offered you. I haven't mentioned it to Allison yet, as you requested, but she should know about it. In fact, if you don't tell her soon, I will. I'm just waiting for the right time to bring it up. It means a lot of changes for us, so I wanted the time to really consider it. I'll let you know next week for sure. How's that? That's great. So you're finally going to consider it. I promise I'll do that. I've been thinking about it quite a lot lately, so I need to make a decision soon. For my own reasons, I left his office, stopping to say a few words to Allison before heading down to see Ben. At his desk, I just stopped for a second and said loudly enough for Colin to hear me that I thought his assessment of the Baxter job was right on target. I then gave him the thumbs up symbol to let him know I heard the talk he had with Colin. His eyes opened very wide as I did, but he didn't say anything. He just nodded. I patted him on the back as I removed the little transmitter. As before, he felt nothing. I finished the day without any distractions and waited for Allison before heading home. I wanted to tell her I had to drop off the van for someone and would catch a cab back to my car so to look for me a little late. She hugged me goodbye and left, heading home. I noticed Colin standing at the door watching her leave. He glanced over at me and turned to go back in. I dropped the van off, locked the camera into position, and made sure it picked up the room number the clerk had given me. I locked it up and reminded the proprietor of the motel that I had to leave it there overnight and maybe tomorrow. I slipped him another $20 and thanked him for his understanding. He pocketed the money and gave me a high five. With that, I headed home. Friday night at home was another surprise. Allison had ordered pizza for the kids, and she said she had made arrangements for them to go to Grandma's tonight and tomorrow. I asked what the occasion was, and she said that she liked Wednesday night so much she wanted to continue it tonight. Did I have a problem? Not so much. Well, Friday night was much the same as Wednesday night, except we did some new things. While I enjoyed them, I had a sick feeling when I thought of where she could have learned them. But when I asked her about it later, she pulled this book out of her nightstand with a giggle and showed me an article about intimacy after 35. Damned if it didn't have most of the things we had done the last 2 nights. For example, she showed me a position she liked where she laid flat on her stomach with a pillow under her hips. This allowed me to enter from behind, but she didn't have to hold herself up on her knees. She loved that position but had always complained about her knees hurting. She also wanted me to try something new since we had never done that, and she showed me several other things that she said looked very interesting. She pointed at the illustrations and grinned. She promised to do something different but wouldn't tell me how. She had learned that from the book as well. I enjoyed myself that night very much. I tried to do everything she wanted me to, and I succeeded pretty much. It took most of the night, but so what? I promised myself that I would pick up some herbal supplements. We lay side by side, and I finally got up the nerve to ask her where this was coming from. Allison, I love what we're doing, and I want so much to please you, but I have to ask, where's this coming from? Why now? If I didn't trust you so much, I'd wonder if it wasn't a guilty conscience. Sorry, Bri. It was something that Naomi said to me last week that I can't repeat. I just keep thinking about us and the girls and our life together, and it makes me so happy sometimes that I just need to express myself. I happened to pick this way because I wanted to show you just how much you mean. To me, I listened, and it made my heart soar to know that she was happy. But in the next instant, I wondered how she could have kept a secret affair if that was true. Should I ask her? What if I made a little noise? I'm glad that you feel that way. Are you sure that I make you happy enough? Are you satisfied with our intimacy, or is something lacking, and that's why you are doing these new things? You can be honest and tell me. I love our intimacy, and you have always satisfied me in every way. I have no reason to want more, but I just don't want us to get into a rut where we get so used to things that we let it become routine and unexciting. Can't you see that? Don't you want to always want me this way? You never have to worry about that. I love you and will always love you. I can't imagine doing anything to ruin what we have together that's good because I wouldn't let you. You're mine now and forever. We spent the rest of the night in each other's arms, and that's how we woke. I was pleasantly exhausted, but I wanted to take a shower with Allison. I shook her awake and pulled her into the shower with me. She came willingly and with mock irritation. She complained bitterly about being pulled out of her warm bed, but when I let her go, she didn't leave. We turned the water on and she quickly moved under the spray, turning to hold her arms out for me to join her. We helped each other all over and paid particular attention to each other's body. I felt content within minutes, and she made every effort to keep me that way. I reassured her with a tight hug, letting her know how nice she is. She put both arms around my neck and hugged me back. When I asked, she said that she was ready for the day, but that she would expect something more intimate that night. With that, we finished the shower. I drove down to the motel lot very early that morning and made sure everything was set. I set all of the timers to begin at 1 and made sure that the audio tapes were set for 5-hour recording. The video was DVD, and that would take at least 7 hours compressed. That would cover the whole afternoon. I initiated the sequences and locked the van. When those two lovers walked into their love nest, they would become the stars of my new movie, and the first showing would make a very loud impression on everyone involved. I drove back home to get my clubs and wish my lovely wife a good day. That afternoon was horrible by any stretch. I played golf with two guys I met at the club, and if my score was any indication, they must feel that I was wasting my money on a club membership. I ended up buying drinks for all of us as the big loser. It was just after 5 when I drove down to the van to make sure all was in order. I looked over at the room but didn't see any cars or activity, so I assumed that they had already left. To be sure, I put in a quick call to my home phone and Allison answered. I just told her I was on my way and hung up. Since it was so close to the time to meet Allison, I drove home without viewing any of the information I had collected. I really wanted to have it before dinner, but then thought about our planned evening. Why not enjoy what she had to offer at least one more time? After all, I did love being intimate with her, and even if she was being unfaithful to me, it shouldn't ruin my evening. I thought about that, but found myself beginning to feel emotional again. Why was she doing this to me? I loved her more than I could imagine, and I didn't know how I was going to go on without her. I knew that if I had the information I expected to see on the surveillance tapes that I would have to consider a separation. I loved her, but I couldn't accept her behavior. What about the kids? She was a good mother and she should have custody. That was only fair. If she was cheating, she must have some reason that I wasn't aware of. She was a good person who had made a mistake. Okay, I could live with that. She could keep the kids and I would provide support. These were the thoughts that occupied my mind as I drove home to meet my wife. I wasn't sure I could go through with this evening, but I had to try. I couldn't confront her until I had evidence. In the back of my mind was this tiny voice that kept denying all of the information I had so far. It kept insisting that something was wrong. I ignored it. Facts were facts, and soon, I would have all the facts I needed. At home, Allison was already showered and dressed. She mentioned that she would put the finishing touches on her outfit when it was time to get ready to leave. In the meantime, I hurried to get myself ready, and we were able to leave right on time for our reservations. My wife was stunning. She always caught people's attention when we entered a room. She was used to receiving admiring glances from men, but she paid no mind to them. However, I couldn't help but notice, and it always made me feel proud. Tonight, it was a reminder of what could happen. She was also intelligent and made a great dinner companion. We discussed all the things husbands and wives talk about when they have some free time, and we had wine with dinner, her more than me since I was the designated driver. She seemed to be playfully teasing me. My wife of 14 years and the mother of my 2 girls was flirting with me. It was both heartwarming and bittersweet to think that she might have spent hours with another man earlier that afternoon, and now she was flirting with her husband at dinner. As we finished our dessert, which consisted of a delicious chocolate mousse and a small sorbet, We exchanged smiles. Both of us were eager to continue our evening in the privacy of our bedroom at home. I signaled the waiter for the bill while Allison excused herself to use the restroom. We walked hand in hand to the car. As I turned onto the main street, heading towards our house, Allison moved closer to me and rested her head on my shoulder. She reached up to take my hand off the wheel and placed it on her lap. With a gentle nudge, I wrapped my arm around her, just like we used to do when we were young and madly in love. She let out a contented sigh and relaxed. We drove home in comfortable silence. Back at home, Allison busied herself with getting the house ready for bed before looking at me. "Shall we go upstairs and continue where we left off this morning? I think you owe me something since you only gave me a preview earlier." "Remember, I remember. Lead the way and I'll be right behind you." We hurried upstairs to the bedroom, and Allison stopped in front of the bed, reaching for my hand. "If you were a real romantic, you could have had some fun in the car, but I didn't want you to get distracted and have an accident. I saved it for later." "I love it. Come here and let me hug you." We made love to each other that night. We were looking at each other in happiness and hugged each other without giving it a second thought. "You look incredibly pretty standing there with those pearls around your neck. You are absolutely beautiful. I could stare at you all night. This is a sight that only you will ever see. I want tonight to be the start of a new chapter in our lives together." "Are you sure? Is this what you want? I would never do anything to hurt you or make you feel ashamed. You know that, right? I trust you fully and give myself to you completely. I love you with all my heart." In that instant, I believed her and knew that no matter what I discovered the next day, I would never give up on her. I would deal with tomorrow when it comes. But for tonight, I would love this woman with all my heart. We spent the night exploring new intimate experiences together. We made love in positions I didn't think were possible, and she introduced me to it. She playfully quoted page numbers when I questioned her imagination. It was a magical night. I had multiple moments of intense happiness. We fell asleep in each other's arms and woke up late on Sunday morning. Allison hesitated to get out of bed, so I suggested we recreate one of our favorite moments from the previous night. She enthusiastically agreed, and we made love one more time before finally getting up. Sunday meant she needed to pick up our girls. I told her I had to quickly check on something at work and that I would return home soon. She mentioned that she might stay at her mom's for a while before coming back. That gave me the time I needed. I retrieved all the tapes and printouts from the van without any issues and drove the van back to the site. I called a cab to take me back to my car and then drove home. The first thing I did was check the GPS printout. It confirmed that her car was indeed at Statler Street where the motel was located, and my heart sank. I had hoped against hope, but it seemed my fears were justified. Nevertheless, I decided to watch the video for myself to confirm. I turned on the TV and DVD player, inserted the DVD, and anxiously pressed play. The picture quality was excellent, and the motel room was clearly visible in the center of the screen. I fast-forwarded until I saw a car pull into the lot and then slowed it down to normal speed. I watched as Colin Wilson got out of the car, opened the door to the room, and disappeared inside. I fast-forwarded again until another car entered the scene. I observed a woman getting out of the car and approaching the door. She knocked and Colin opened it. He smiled, and the woman walked inside. Just as she entered, she turned around to glance at the lot, and that's when I saw her face. My heart felt as though it might stop beating. I stopped the video, rewound it to the beginning, and watched it all the way through before ejecting the DVD. "I can't believe this," I whispered to myself. I had to call Bill Quinn immediately. There was one address in my wife's address book that I had to investigate. I smiled to myself. I now had all the information I needed to set things right. I called Bill at home, and he agreed to meet with me alone, just the two of us. We settled on meeting at a nearby restaurant close to the office. I brought my portable DVD player with a 9-screen and headphones so Bill could watch the evidence in privacy. I shared everything with him, starting from the tape of Ben's meeting with Colin, all the way up to the present, ensuring both Ben and Colin were fully exposed in their wrongdoings. While it pained Bill to hear Colin speak about Allison in such a way, I urged Bill to watch the DVD for himself before saying anything else. As he watched, I averted my gaze, giving him the privacy he needed. After finishing the video, he looked up at me, and I waited patiently until he was ready to speak. Once he had regained his composure, I made a request. I want both of them fired for violating the morals clause in their employment contracts. They need to be gone by lunchtime on Monday. If you agree to that, I will hand over all the evidence, and I promise never to mention this again. Bill looked at me in surprise but eventually smiled. It was a relief to see that smile. I didn't want him involved any more than necessary. You have my word. I will take care of it first thing Monday, and they will be escorted off the premises. They will be dead to me. I may also pursue further legal action, but it's best that you don't know the details for now. Is that fair enough? Fair enough with that. I handed him the satchel containing all the surveillance data, except for one small cassette that I kept for myself. I had plans for that tape. My wife was about to receive a surprise. Bill and I continued to talk for another hour, sorting out additional decisions we needed to make. We shook hands as we parted ways, and Bill spoke one last time before I left. You are a good and honorable man, Brian. I am grateful for what you have done, and I admire your restraint in handling this situation. If you were more hot-headed, things could have gone much worse. Thank you, and I respect you. Feeling better than I had in a long time, I headed home to my family. Little did they know about the changes that were about to occur. That evening at home, everything seemed normal, and I was in a wonderfully positive mood. Allison kept asking me about what was going on, but I told her she would find out the next day at work. We were both exhausted from the previous nights, or rather mornings, so we went to bed early, with no intentions other than sleep. Allison wanted me to hold her, and I gladly obliged. We fell asleep in each other's arms, just as we had the night before. The next day at work was hectic. Around 8:30, I received a call from Allison, curious to know what was happening. I pretended to be clueless and asked her for details. She explained that Bill had summoned both Ben Kramer and Colin Wilson to his office immediately. She mentioned that they were both in there and shouting could be heard. I feigned ignorance and urged her to keep me updated. She called 20 minutes later and told me that Bill asked her to have security come to his office right away. She held the receiver while speaking to someone at her desk and then came back on to inform me that Bill asked the guard to escort Ben and Colin back to their desks. She quickly hung up and promised to call. I didn't hear anything from her for the next hour, until she finally called to inform me that both Ben and Colin had been fired and that Bill wanted her to type up disciplinary letters for both. The reason for their dismissal was a violation of the morals clause. She was excited. This was the most unusual thing to happen in her time as Bill's secretary. She insisted that we go out for lunch together to discuss this. I agreed. During lunch, Allison was going on and on about what had happened that morning. She told me that both of them were escorted out of the building and warned never to come back. She said Bill was angry and agitated all morning and even yelled at her once, before quickly apologizing. She finally asked me what it was all about. Why would I have any knowledge about it? Bill told me to ask you when I asked him. He said, ask Brian. He knows all about it, and he's the one that opened my eyes to a lot of things. That's what he said. So you have to tell me. Before I tell you what happened, I want you to listen to this recording first. I handed her the recording of Ben and Colin talking about the motel. She started listening with interest, and then I watched her face turn pale. She looked at me with wide eyes, and her mouth formed an O of surprise. She listened until the end and then angrily took off the headphones. That's not true. He's lying. I never went to any motel with him, and I never would. You can't believe this recording. Is that what you gave Bill? Does he believe this too? No, he doesn't believe Colin, and neither do I. I have to explain something to you, and I want you to listen to me carefully. Will you do that? As I said that I didn't believe the recording, she relaxed a little, but she was still angry and a little scared. She simply nodded and motioned for me to continue. I overheard Ben and Colin talking just over a week ago. Colin was telling Ben about you and him at the party. He said he got you drunk and then took you out to his car and had an intimate experience with you in the back seat. He was very detailed about the events, and he described what he did and what you did, and he told it all to Ben. Ben listened and believed what he heard. You'll be happy to know that he was so impressed he wanted Colin to include him in the next meeting. I was confused and tried to think of any way he could be telling the truth. I couldn't believe it, but I had to be sure. Allison tried to interrupt me before I could continue, but I talked over her. I had to convey the truth before she exploded. I had been talked to Colin, and Colin said that he had booked a motel room on Statler Street for Saturday afternoon, when you were supposed to get your hair done. I was upset then, because how could he know about your hair appointment unless you told him? That's when I mentioned Saturday to you, remember? We made plans for that evening. But he wasn't with. I shushed her with a hand wave and continued. I decided to be absolutely sure it was really you, so I used one of the company's surveillance vans and set it up to track your car and to make a video recording of who went into the motel room. I got the desk clerk to confirm the room number so I would know which room to watch, and I recorded everything and reviewed it on Sunday. That's when I called Bill and gave him everything. Ben and Colin were fired at my request. Allison had listened to my story attentively. She still seemed confused and couldn't believe that I thought she was with him at the motel. But I wasn't with him. I was getting my hair done, just as I told you. My hair salon is on Statler Street, but I didn't know about any motel. Don't you believe me? I actually know who he was with because she told me. It was. I quickly interrupted her before she could reveal the name. I had to convince her that I had trusted her all along. It might not be the truth, but it was the best course of action. Yes, I said that I believed you, and I'll tell you why. I did capture a video recording of Colin that day, and he did have a woman visit him as he claimed. The woman that visited him in that motel room was Bill's wife, Naomi. It first crossed my mind after talking to Jerry Scogins a few days ago. Since Colin claimed that he took you out to his car that night, I asked Jerry if you had been a little drunk, and he just laughed and told me that you and his wife were drinking sodas and were inseparable that evening, and that you even asked her if she would stay with you to discourage Colin from asking her to dance. He said it was clear that you didn't care much for Colin. When I asked him if Colin ever offered to take you outside for some fresh air, he just laughed and said no way. So you actually doubted me? You set all this up to spy on me? I'm not sure I like that. You really didn't trust me? Even after Wednesday night and Friday night and again on Saturday. Of course I trusted you, but I couldn't explain Colin's story. Why would he say those things if they weren't true? Then it occurred to me that he was trying to divert Ben from knowing who he was really with. If Ben thought it was you, he wouldn't ask any more questions. I had no idea who it was, so that's why I had to find out the truth. I just wish it hadn't been Bill's wife. He was devastated. We continued talking and eventually had to go back to work in the afternoon. Allison accepted my explanation about trying to discover who Colin was with, and I left it at that. I did feel some doubts and shame about my actions, but I wasn't sorry that I had uncovered the truth. We were in a good place right now, and I didn't want anything to change that. Things quieted down at work that afternoon, but I received another call from Allison informing me that Bill wanted her to come in to talk to him later in the day. I told her that I genuinely didn't know what it was about, and I think she believed me. I didn't hear anything else until later that night at home. After dinner, the girls were their normal energetic selves, making phone calls and having secret meetings in the bathroom, but they eventually calmed down and went to bed. We enjoyed the peacefulness for a while before Allison told me what Bill had wanted. He told me to consider how lucky I am to have a man like you as my husband. He went on and on about trust, respect, and love, and what it all means and what it's like to lose it. He finally told me about Naomi and what she had done, and he wanted my advice. What did you tell him? Were you able to help him? I couldn't tell him what to do. I simply asked him if he truly loved her and if he could forgive her. If he could, I urged him to talk to her and let her explain. But I told him that if he couldn't move past it and forgive her, he should let her go immediately. Don't drag it out and don't let it become bitter. He listened to what I said, so maybe I was able to help. I'm sure you did. Did he mention anything else about me? No, nothing else. Why? Is there something else? Well, yes, there is. Bill offered me a position as corporate vice president of investigations. I would have complete control of all the investigators in all the branches around the world, and I'd have the choice to work in different locations. We could move to California, Florida, or any other place where we have a branch with more than 5 investigators. I would still report to Bill, but only to him. It would mean a significant increase in salary and perks like stock and other benefits. Allison let out a scream and jumped into my lap, wrapping her arms around me. She couldn't let go and couldn't stop laughing with joy. When did this happen? Is it because of what you did today? Is this some kind of reward? Now who's doubting whom? Bill offered this to me 6 months ago. I just wasn't ready to consider it until now. I guess the thought of losing everything I have made the decision feel more real somehow. Last week, I thought for a moment that I could lose you. It made me think, Brian, you could never lose me like that. Not to someone else. That will never happen, and you will never think like that again. Do you hear me? Never again.